but the Supreme Court ordered the White House to return him, even if they were just going to deport him to another country.
It's facilitate, but yes, no, I mean. Welcome to On Deadline, the Washington Examiner's political game show. I'm Tianelo Desher.
And I'm Christian Daytok.
Each week during the show, we give our opinions on the news of the week, and you get to vote with whom you agree. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Today, we begin above the fold. Christian, what is the top trending topic you're looking at today?
Well, I don't know about trending topics, but last week, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, announced that he'd actually be stepping back from his work with the Trump administration. He told callers on a shareholder conference call that he will be scaling back to 1 to 2 days with which he is interfacing with Doge. Obviously, this comes after Tesla's shares have fallen like 25% since January, a precipitous plunge. You like that word? But I want to talk about what Elon Musk actually got out of all of this, other than a very public headache. Well, billions in federal contracts for one. In April, SpaceX won a Space Force contract to the tune of $6 billion through 2029 to send rockets up into space for the military. But ultimately, what's $6 billion to the world's richest man, let alone a company that makes roughly $3 billion from the federal government already? I view Musk as a cautionary tale to other billionaires. There's a reason we've seen the elitist of the elite just dip their toes into politics rather than cannonballing in like Musk did over the last year. I do not think we'll see more people follow in his footsteps.
Christian, that earnings report that Elon Musk was debuting, the top lines were just absolutely brutal. Tesla's $400 million net profit, down 71% year over year. And the pool of products for Cybertrucks, basically, those deliveries quarter over quarter were down 24% because the brand is now seen as inherently political. The one bright spot for it, and the one thing that I wonder if this is the long-term strategy, if Elon did gain something major out of this, is Tesla, for years now, has been trying to 100% vertically integrate its production process. Where now 85% of everything it makes in the US is USMCA compliant and thus immune to the tariffs. And they have the only major refinery for lithium. Other companies like GM, they're able to make the lithium-ion batteries, but they still have to outsource the lithium refining. And that process, China dominates it. It's what they do 85% of all lithium extraction and refining. So you have to wonder here, has Elon Musk, in those internal meetings, understanding how deadly serious Trump has been with the tariffs, with the decoupling from China, has he positioned his brands to be future-proofed, tariff-proofed? And is there a way where, like, Tesla, ostensibly it's a car company, but what if it becomes the battery company? What if this is like the long-term triangulation of both Biden and Trump foreign policy and focus on chips and batteries? Could that be, or am I just impressing on him, 5D underwater backgammon strategy?
I don't think you're wrong, especially about, batteries and Tesla, re-controlling their entire supply chain. But I don't think that Elon Musk necessarily had much input with the president when it came to implementing the tariff agenda. He was there for one reason only, right? It was to slash and burn the federal bureaucracy and the federal budget. And, everyone else, especially in those cabinet meetings, like we're going to have one tomorrow, Wednesday morning, which we'll see if Mr. Musk appears or not. But no one was taking P's and Q's from him when it came to trade, which I do think is interesting because, again, I'm not trying to gas up Tesla or throw Elon a bone here, but I think the model with which, again, they took control of their supply chain, made everything USMCA compliant in perhaps anticipation of Trump's tariff agenda, that's basically the model that the White House wants all companies, not just auto manufacturers, to embark on, again, in order to reshore manufacturing to the United States. The battery component, I think, is probably Elon's long game with Tesla. But you mentioned China, and again, just the tariffs, the way they're going to impact Tesla's market share in places like the European Union, where they already have, a sizable share of all the cars there with the climate protections in place. I'm not so sure that this will play out in the long game in any positive form for Musk Again, other than making him the second greatest loved person in the MAGA movement other than Donald Trump himself.
Yeah, and just like when we think about historically really popular brands, let's take something that became sort of left-wing polarized, like the NFL.
Yeah.
Pre-2021, when all the Kaepernick stuff was heating up, BLM was heating up, people kneeling for the national anthem, what we saw were like viewership went down for the NFL and for the NBA as they got negatively polarized because most commercial brands are not supposed to be political. You should not have to choose, oh, I'm going to watch this sport that's coded as liberal or this, and with Tesla, you have the reverse, where the car has been coded as conservative because of Elon's involvement in the Trump administration. And historically, Elon has been an incredibly popular figure, especially among young people in the polls, and his polling is totally cratered in this time. So you have to wonder, if he leaves, is there a rebound, just given how popular he used to be, or is the damage done?
I mean, it's possible. Look, in the Fox poll that had Donald Trump's approvals, at his term low and even lower at this point in time than they did during the first 100 days of his first term, Elon's polling like 10, 15 points below him. I mean, I really don't think there's any coming back for him. Again, he's the world's richest man in the world, so who really cares? Yeah. But ultimately, he should have taken the Michael Jordan approach, right? For years, people wondered why Michael Jordan didn't get in and back Democratic candidates, even though he had the political the social capital and the financial means to do it. And he had a great quote, "Republicans buy sneakers to be like Mike." Tiana, what's the big story on your plate this week?
The New York Times reports that Donald Trump is internally weighing various proposals to jack up the birth rate, right? This is the Pro-natalist administration. Among those proposals, there is reserving 30% of Fulbright scholarships for parents, a $5,000 baby bonus immediately after a baby's delivery, National Medal of Motherhood after 6 or more children. My question is twofold. One, why don't we just focus on the very elegant solution of increasing the child tax credit, which maintains the simplicity of the tax code and, quite frankly, would be much smarter than no tax on tips or no tax on Social Security. It would only cost about $500 billion over a decade to increase the child tax credit to $3,000. But the second question is, why are we focusing on doing things that haven't worked in any other country, right? Hungary has gone all in on celebrating mothers who have 6 or more children, and their birth rate is 1.52 children per woman. You have countries like South Korea that pay women to have children, it's under 1. Whereas, I think a lot of this is, we know that paying women to have children, it doesn't work. It does not work. But what does work is what we're seeing in some red states. Deregulating daycare, deregulating housing, zoning reform, like real things that make it easier for you to have children.
My question to you is this, Tiana. Do you think this proposal from Trump, and it's not really just the $5,000 checks for new mothers, it's things like cutting income taxes for everyone making under $200,000 a year, raising taxes on the highest earners in the corporate tax rate. Do you think Donald Trump is trusting the science when it comes to the birth rates specifically, or is he just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks as his polling slides and maybe be borrowing from the Democratic playbook in order to sway some of those people in the middle, you think?
It does feel like throwing things at the wall. And you know what? I'm sure the honest to God proponents of Medicare for All think like they're doing a very nice thing. But we look at the numbers internally and no, it just does not work. The math ain't mathin'. And that is a thing with when Trump says, oh, we're going to cut all income taxes for people making under $150,000 or $200,000. We know that doesn't work because the bottom 50% of earners only contribute 3% of all income taxes paid anyway, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things we see from other countries in terms of, so there are the countries that are trying and failing, right? Hungary being an example, South Korea being an example. Tucker Carlson keeps on talking about how conservative and pro-family Russia is, and their birth rate's 1.42 compared to ours, which is 1.66. Let's look at 2 countries that have kind of bucked the trend. Israel, with a staggering almost 3 children per woman, and France, which is at 1.8, which is still just below replacement level fertility. But if you compare it to other similar countries, it has not had the steep dropping off effect. And I think in part it's cultural. So look at this Time Use survey that shows in every other country the amount of time that parents of both gender, of both college-educated, non-college-educated, spend so much more time with their kids in a day than any other point in human history. The only country that isn't true for, France. And when you go to France, you see there is a heavy emphasis on parents don't necessarily like center the child, not in a neglectful way, I think in a very healthy way, in a way where, you know, you give birth and they have a very robust daycare program and you bring your kid with you to the cafe and you bring them to the park and you kind of let them be bored in a way that like culturally, I think we are very scared of letting children in America be bored and not centering everything around them. I think it makes parenthood seem really ominous and scary to people who don't have kids or who aren't around kids.
Yeah.
And so, like, from a cultural perspective, I can think of two ways. Like, the Trump administration has already totally changed the game. One, having someone like Caroline Leavitt, who is this young conservative Christian woman, and also a mother.
Yeah.
A mother of, like, a very young baby.
A brand new mother. She had her first infant on the campaign trail.
Like, that's an awesome thing, I think, for, you know, especially women to see. And then secondarily, J.D. Vance. Say what you will about the guy on policy, but that is a feminist dad who clearly does his equal 50-50 share of the parenting. When you see him always carrying his children, bringing them to the Vatican, bringing them to Notre Dame, like, that is a very cool thing to see. And I guarantee you, changing the cultural game will do way more than a national medal of motherhood.
Up next, time for Yays and Nays, a segment where we get to vote on the other news of the week. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. You should vote on which one of us was right.
The FBI arrest of Judge Hannah Dugan demonstrates no one is above the law.
No, definitely no. What this demonstrates is that Donald Trump is taking the guardrails off. Everyone who's talking about how there's going to be a fascistic takeover, Donald Trump is actively trying to undermine the two other branches of government. This is a check in that box, right? Hannah Dugan, the district judge in Wisconsin, she perhaps might have interfered with an immediate arrest of an illegal immigrant, and but ultimately, like, ICE got him, right? He got him 10 feet, 20 feet away from the courthouse. This is crazy. This is Donald Trump making good on his promise to go after judges, whether it's impeachment, whether it's arrests. He tried to do it in 2018, and that failed. And look, I just look at this as Donald Trump. We gave him the benefit of the doubt coming into office. We said, all that stuff's fear-mongering. Maybe he'll be okay, but ultimately we should cheer for him because if he does well, the country does well. He's back to his old tricks, and I don't like this one bit. And quite frankly, I'm a little scared about where this thing can escalate.
If Trump went after a judge for what they were doing inside the courtroom, this would be a very different conversation, right? In the same way, the Supreme Court ruled that you can't be, criminally indicted for official acts of the presidency. That is different than if Donald Trump, got a DUI or, beat up someone in his personal life. That is not an official act of the presidency. In the same way, holding an illegal immigrant away from ICE custody, harboring them, that is textbook obstruction of justice. Okay, so let's look at the defendant in question. His name is Eduardo Flores Ruiz. He is an illegal immigrant, and he was charged with 3 counts of battery, domestic violence, and infliction of physical pain. This is someone that the witnesses in question were scared to testify against him because, it's always difficult to get people to testify on the record with domestic violence cases. The judge in question, Hannah Dugan, was harboring him as a fugitive, right? And when you walked into her courtroom, she had on the door warnings for defense attorneys. If you fear for your client, in coded language, basically saying, bring them to me. That is not within your capacity as a judge, does not mean you are allowed to harbor illegal immigrants who are wanted for violent crimes, who have been charged. And look, there are plenty of more sympathetic illegal immigrants that while the letter of the law may say they are illegally present here, they haven't otherwise committed violent offenses. And those are going to be the difficult cases in the court of public opinion. I don't think people are going to be super excited at seeing dreamers that have gone to college and served this country and never been on welfare if they are subject to the mass deportations. People need to stop jumping and defending everything this early in the process, especially when judges don't get a pass to harbor illegal immigrants who are charged with violent crimes in the same way presidents wouldn't get that pass.
I'd be willing to accept your argument 100% if this had occurred in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
If this was one judge overstepping her judicial, responsibilities and trying to, obstruct the government in another capacity, sure. But it's not happening in a vacuum. I mean, it's very, publicly happening as Donald Trump is saying, we should arrest judges who disagree with me, not necessarily judges who act against an arm of the government. It's just, it's thought policing. It's threatening. He's trying to subsume the entirety of the federal government for the executive branch. And I think it's scary. And I mean, again, look at the Abrego Garcia case, which we've talked about before. We don't want to relitigate his actual criminal history.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court ordered the White House to return him, even if they were just going to deport him to another country.
It's facilitate. But yes, no, I mean, the hilarity of it all is that theoretically, Trump could just deport him, not bring him back to America and then deport him. But I believe the way the order is written, he could just send him from El Salvador to literally any other country that would be willing to take him.
He could send him to the detention center at Guantanamo. That's U.S. soil.
Yeah. Now it's time for us to fill in the blank.
Trump and Zelensky meeting at the Vatican means blank.
This is interesting. It means a lot of things. I mean, the first point to me is that the negotiations with Putin are not going well. And it's not just the meeting with Zelensky. It's his tweets last week in all caps saying, Vladimir, stop. That's a very different tone that we've heard Donald Trump address the Russian president with over the last couple of months. But ultimately, I kind of view this as him finally recognizing that he can't just be president. He has to also do president, right? And if he wants a ceasefire and a Nobel Peace Prize and all of the fanfare that comes along with it, he actually needs to roll up his sleeves and act like the president and negotiate, right?
Yeah.
You can't just delegate and think that people are going to bend over backwards and everything that you want to happen will happen. He kind of forgot over the last 4 years what it really was like to be the commander-in-chief and the chief executive of this country. And now he's scrambling to pick up the pieces as his polling is falling apart.
I mean, it means like Trump has received the wake-up call. And this is the number one reason why I'm not a total like doomer pessimist right now is we've seen at a couple of times Trump take public feedback and pivot.
Yeah.
We saw it with, the after Liberation Day and the stock market tanked and then the bond market tanked, he imposed that 90-day pause.
Yeah.
And he went from a posture of, we're just doing this because we feel like it, to, oh no, we're going to work and do trade deals. Mm-hmm. And now in the foreign policy arena, it is crucial that Trump realizes, like, you've proposed multiple peace deals. And at every turn, the Ukrainians have been saying, okay, we're coming to the table, we'll take the mineral deal, we'll do an actual pause. And Putin has said no or offered terms that everyone recognizes. You aren't just going to hand over 1/5 of Ukrainian territory and not allow there to be any security guarantees, right? Not being a member of NATO is one thing, but if you're saying, oh, the mineral agreement, non-starter, we have to engage in the quote-unquote denazification of the Ukrainian government, aka put in a, Putin puppet state. No go. And like, we all know, the person that threw the first punch is probably not the one that wants to exit the fight, especially when it's been this much of a stalemate. Like, the front lines of the war have virtually remained unchanged within, I think it's like a 2% margin for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's not benefiting either party. But the problem is that Putin does not exist in the realm of reality or in the realm of what I believe some isolationists in the Trump faction believe could be true. You hear this Obama-esque line from them that, like, we've discussed a lot, that it's not the same thing as the multipolar world. They call it spheres of influence, where they say, we only need to have control of our sphere of influence, and then, we can work to get the Russians on our side to help us with the Chinese. No, the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians are all working together. There is a reason why when Witkoff goes to work on the Iran deal, Iran very publicly sends envoys to the Russians and to the Chinese, it's to signal there is no, oh, we're not going to have a world leader. Someone will film that vacuum, and it will be the worst people on earth. It will be the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, the Houthis, all of our enemies, people that would be happy to wipe America off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And so I think, Trump, again, one of the benefits of being as ideologically flexible as Trump is that he is willing to respond to the realities on the ground in a way that, I don't think, a Steve Bannon would, right?
No.
So hopefully, I think one other thing that went unmentioned with the whole Zelensky catastrophe in the Oval Office is this is a guy who has been traversing the world in between fighting a war for 3 years, probably getting no sleep and flying constantly or trying to prevent his country from being blown off the map, dealing in a second language that is not native to him. So not only was he likely exhausted and stressed out during that meeting, he was also trying to converse in English. Zelensky did an interview with Ben Shapiro that was released over the weekend, and crucially, he was using a translator during it. And we know Zelensky speaks pretty good English, but there are things that just culturally get lost in translation.
Yeah.
And so I think as much as Trump is pivoting, you're also seeing Zelensky pivot too. He probably realizes, yeah, next time I go to the Oval, I'm wearing a suit, and I'm using a translator, because some things that in Ukrainian are considered polite and normal come across as kind of curt and, argumentative in Anglo culture.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more triangulate, and that's why those photos were so remarkable in the Vatican. You have not only the beautiful background and the fact that this is maybe a miracle from the late Pope Francis, right? God rest his soul. But also just Trump almost looked grandfatherly with Zelensky. It was not a hostile posture. We've seen Trump do hostile.
It was intimate.
Yeah.
And private, and they appeared to be equals,
Yes.
which I think is important.
Equals, and that there was just something there where it made me incredibly hopeful for this administration. Look, I still want this president to succeed, and I think that was just a very welcome sign, and what a place to do it.
Couldn't agree more. Anyway, that's all the time we've got for this week. Don't forget to let us know in the comments who you think won this week's clash, and subscribe, and share this video with your friends. I'm Christian Daytalk.
And I'm Tiana Desher.
We'll see you next week, but in the meantime, go check out more of our great reporting at washingtonexaminer.com.